Imagine a world where Robert Downey Jr. never became Iron Man. A world where Tony Stark, the genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, looked and sounded completely different. Where the foundation of the Marvel Cinematic Universe rested on the shoulders of someone else. Today, we're stepping into that alternate universe, asking the question, what if someone else had played Iron Man? And who were the actors that almost did? Let's rewind. It's 2006. Marvel Studios is gambling big. They're about to launch a shared cinematic universe, starting with a character who, at the time, wasn't even a household name. Iron Man. They didn't have Spider-Man. They didn't have the X-Men. They had Tony Stark. And they needed the right man to play him. Enter the audition room. First up, Tom Cruise. Yes, that Tom Cruise. Long before the MCU was a twinkle in Kevin Feige's eye, Cruise had expressed interest in the role. For years, he was rumored to be circling the character, even as far back as the 1990s. With his signature charm, star power, and intensity, Cruise could have brought something entirely different to Tony Stark. Imagine the charisma of Jerry Maguire, mixed with the swagger of Top Gun, and the fire of Mission Impossible. But here's the thing, Tom Cruise is always in control. And Tony Stark? He's brilliant, yes, but also chaotic. Flawed. Vulnerable. And that's where Cruise may have fallen short. The very polish that made him a superstar might have robbed Tony Stark of the grit that made him real. Cruise reportedly wanted more creative control. More say in how the character would be portrayed. Ultimately, the stars didn't align. But what if they had? Would Iron Man have launched the MCU as successfully? Or would Cruise's megastar image have overshadowed the story? We'll never know. But he wasn't the only contender. Let's talk about Nicolas Cage. In the early 2000s, Cage was at the height of his fame. He'd done Face Off, The Rock, Con Air. He was an Oscar winner who also loved comic books, so much so that he named his son Kal-El, after Superman. Cage's version of Tony Stark would have been wild. Unpredictable. Intense. You can almost picture him in the cave scene, banging out the Iron Man suit, eyes wide with desperation, shouting about electromagnets in his chest. It would have been something. Maybe brilliant. Maybe unhinged. But would it have worked long-term? Could the eccentricity sustain an entire franchise? Marvel didn't think so. They moved on. Another name that surfaced? Sam Rockwell. You might know him as Justin Hammer in Iron Man 2, but he was originally considered for Tony Stark himself. Rockwell has the wit, the arrogance, the swagger. But at the time, he wasn't a big name. And Marvel was already taking a risk with a B-tier character. They needed a lead who could carry the brand. Still, Rockwell as Stark would have given us a more offbeat, maybe even darker interpretation. Less quippy, more cerebral. Fascinating. But ultimately, he didn't get the part. And then, there was Timothy Olyphant. You've seen him in Justified, Deadwood, and The Mandalorian. He auditioned for Iron Man 2. And by all accounts, he did well. Olyphant has that dry humor. That smooth confidence. He could have leaned into Stark's sarcastic side with precision. But he lacked the volatility. The brokenness beneath the surface. And that's where things started to click for someone else. Someone Marvel wasn't initially sure about. Someone named Robert Downey Jr. At the time, Downey was a gamble. He had talent, undeniable talent, but also a history of addiction, arrests, and controversy. Jon Favreau, the director of Iron Man, fought hard for him. He saw the parallels. Tony Stark was a man who'd hit rock bottom and came back stronger. So was Downey. He was Tony Stark. But let's entertain a darker timeline. What if Favreau lost that fight? Who else was waiting in the wings? There was Clive Owen. Coming off films like Children of Men and Closer, Owen had that cool, detached charisma. He could have played a more stoic, British-inflected Tony Stark, less wisecracking, more calculating. But would fans have connected with him? Probably not in the same way. Then, there was Colin Farrell. Young. Edgy. Charismatic. A wild card. In a way, Farrell had that same bad boy appeal as Downey. But less heart. Less relatability. He may have made a great villain, but as Stark? Maybe too slippery. And speaking of edge, Johnny Depp was another name on the long list. This was before the controversies, back when Depp was box office gold. With Pirates of the Caribbean, he showed how to turn an eccentric character into a global icon. But Tony Stark isn't Jack Sparrow. And Marvel wanted grounded, not quirky. Serious, not surreal. Still, imagine that, Johnny Depp with an arc reactor in his chest. Slurring tech jargon. Flipping between genius and madness. Would it have worked? Maybe, in a multiverse somewhere. And what about Leonardo DiCaprio? He never seriously pursued the role, but his name was floated. Too young. Too clean-cut. Leo was always chasing prestige, and at the time, comic book movies weren't seen as serious cinema. How ironic that the MCU would later redefine the genre. There were others. Matthew McConaughey, before his renaissance. Keanu Reeves, with his quiet intensity. Hugh Jackman, if timelines had aligned. Patrick Dempsey, who campaigned for the part. Even Henry Cavill, years before he became Superman. But none of them had it. The thing Downey brought. That lived in charm. The bruised ego. The warmth behind the arrogance. The soul beneath the suit. It wasn't just about being cool. It was about being real. Robert Downey Jr. didn't just play Tony Stark. He was Tony Stark. And in doing so, he didn't just kickstart the MCU. He redefined what a superhero could be. Let's not forget, without Iron Man, there is no Avengers. No Endgame. No Infinity Saga. No billion-dollar box office. No cultural shift. It all started with one man, in a cave, with a box of scraps. And that man could have been Cruise. Or Cage. Or Rockwell. But it wasn't. It was Downey. Because sometimes, the perfect actor doesn't just play the role. He becomes it, and in an industry of alternate takes and almosts, that's the version we're lucky to live in. Pause. Still, it's fun to imagine. Outro music fades in, a blend of epic and reflective tones. This has been a journey through the casting multiverse. A look at the Iron Men that might have been. Thanks for listening. And remember, heroes aren't born. They're built. One decision at a time.